For privacy reasons, names and places have been changed. This story is inspired by true events.
On a chaotic day in the spring of 1945, a hospital train carrying 24-year-old Army nurse Lt. Myra Donnelly, among dozens of her colleagues, departed from a temporary field station. Headed towards a critical frontline hospital near Werfen, Austria, it never arrived. Despite extensive Allied investigations and post-war inquiries, the entire consist and all personnel aboard vanished without a trace inside a remote Alpine rail tunnel spur. For 66 agonizing years, the families lived with agonizing uncertainty. The fate of Lt. Donnelly and her colleagues remained a chilling, unsolved mystery. Then, in 2011, archaeologists, guided by obscure wartime sighting diagrams annotated with a red cross and the unsettling note sealed, made a startling discovery in that very tunnel. This is the complete investigation into what happened to Lt. Myra Donnelly and the vanished train of nurses. Before we continue, let us know where you're watching from, and if you enjoy this content, consider liking and subscribing to our channel. Now let's continue. World War II engulfed Europe in an unprecedented maelstrom of destruction and strategic complexity. Amidst the relentless push and pull of front lines, military logistics became the fragile lifeline of armies and populations alike. Supply routes were constantly contested, and the efficient movement of personnel and vital resources was paramount, often determining the very outcome of battles. It was in this environment of constant peril and calculated movement that a unique class of transport served a humanitarian purpose, offering a fleeting sanctuary on rails. These were the hospital consists, specialized trains equipped to evacuate the wounded, transport medical staff, and deliver critical supplies to field hospitals. Each carriage was a testament to the fragile hope for recovery in an era defined by brutal conflict. Among the dedicated professionals serving on these mobile clinics was Lieutenant Myra Donnelly, a 24-year-old Army nurse. Young yet resolute, Lt. Donnelly embodied the quiet heroism of countless individuals who risked their lives daily to alleviate suffering, her presence on such a train a symbol of compassion amidst the carnage. In the autumn of 1944, a particular hospital consist, carrying Lt. Donnelly and her colleagues, found itself caught in the intense crossfire of an escalating air campaign. As Allied bombers targeted strategic points across Austria, the train was diverted from its scheduled route. For safety, it was directed onto an obscure Alpine rail tunnel spur, a rarely used siding tucked away in the mountainous terrain near the small town of Werfen. The diversion was a standard wartime procedure, a temporary measure to protect vital assets and personnel from aerial attack. However, what began as a routine safety maneuver soon spiraled into an enduring enigma. After the air raid subsided and the all-clear was given, the hospital consist never emerged from its temporary refuge. It failed to check in at its designated field station, and all subsequent attempts to establish contact proved futile. An entire train, laden with medical supplies and, more critically, carrying dozens of medical personnel including Lt. Myra Donnelly, had inexplicably vanished. No wreckage was reported, no distress signals received, and no trace left behind. The realization dawned slowly, then with chilling certainty. A hospital train, a symbol of hope, had simply disappeared from all wartime records and communications. The immediate aftermath was marked by a growing unease, quickly escalating into a profound mystery that defied explanation. In the chaos of a continent at war, the fate of an entire train and its dedicated crew, including Lt. Donnelly, became a haunting question. How could such a significant entity, crucial to the war effort and carrying so many lives, simply evaporate into the vastness of the Alps? The disappearance of the hospital consist triggered an immediate, if heavily hampered, search operation. Wartime authorities, already stretched thin by the relentless demands of the conflict, diverted what resources they could to locate the vanished train. Search parties, often small and poorly equipped for the rugged alpine terrain, were dispatched to scour valleys and mountain passes. Inquiries were made at every railway hub and communication post within a 100-mile radius of WWII, desperately seeking any record of the train's passage or an unforeseen diversion. Last known positions were meticulously rechecked, but each lead dissolved into a dead end, leaving only deeper frustration. The ongoing war proved to be the most formidable adversary to the investigation. Communications were frequently disrupted, infrastructure lay damaged by constant bombing, and the sheer scale of the conflict meant that a focused, sustained search for a single missing train was an almost impossible undertaking. Resources that might have been dedicated to a thorough forensic examination were instead funneled into the immediate necessities of the war effort. Every attempt to gain traction was met with the impenetrable fog of battle, where countless incidents went unrecorded and many lives simply ceased to exist without explanation. Crucially, there was a complete absence of physical evidence. No wreckage was discovered along the rail lines, no survivors emerged from the mountains, nor were there any tangible clues that could explain the train's inexplicable vanishing act. The alpine terrain, with its unforgiving peaks and deep ravines, offered no answers, seeming to swallow the entire consist without a trace. As days turned into weeks, the initial urgency gave way to a mounting sense of futility. Investigators, faced with an absolute void of information, watched the case stall, then slowly ossify into an unsolvable mystery. The toll of this uncertainty weighed heavily on the families of those aboard, including the relatives of Lt. Myra Donnelly. With no bodies to mourn, no crash site to visit, and no official explanation, they were left in an agonizing limbo. Hope battled with despair, as each passing day without news only solidified the grim reality. Despite urgent wartime efforts, the hospital train and all its occupants, including Lt. Myra Donnelly, remained utterly lost, swallowed by the vastness and chaos of the conflict, becoming one of the many heartbreaking casualties of a war too immense to fully comprehend. The urgent, if ultimately futile, wartime search for the missing hospital consist eventually faded, overshadowed by the larger movements of the conflict. As the war drew to a close and the world began the arduous task of rebuilding, the enigma of the vanished train became one of countless unresolved tragedies. Days turned into weeks, then months, and finally years. Decades passed, stretching beyond 60 years, yet the mystery of the nurses' train persisted, ossifying into a haunting historical cold case. It became a whispered legend among railway historians and military archivists, a poignant testament to the unresolved losses of World War II, a war so vast it swallowed entire narratives without a trace. No new evidence ever surfaced to explain the disappearance. Official inquiries, initially robust, eventually exhausted every avenue, concluding with no definitive answers. The files were closed, marked unsolved, relegated to dusty archives. With each passing year, the likelihood of a breakthrough diminished. Witnesses, if any existed, aged and passed away, taking with them any potential fragments of memory that might have shed light on that fateful day near WWII. The Alpine Rail Tunnel Spur, once a point of critical diversion, reverted to an ordinary, unassuming spot on a map, its dark secret buried not under earth, but under the relentless march of time and human forgetfulness. The precise coordinates of the incident became obscure, lost within the sheer volume of wartime documentation. Yet, for some, the mystery never truly faded. The families of those aboard, like the relatives of Lt. Myra Donnelly, carried the burden of the unresolved disappearance across generations. Colin Donnelly, Lt. Donnelly's nephew, grew up hearing fragments of the story, a brave aunt who vanished, a hospital train that simply ceased to exist, an unexplained void in the family history. His hope for answers, though constantly battling against the insurmountable odds of time and fading memories, never entirely died. It was a flickering ember, kept alive by the sheer injustice of the unknown, a silent plea for closure echoing through the decades, a generational ache that refused to be silenced. The fate of Lt. Myra Donnelly and the other nurses on that hospital train remained one of the war's most enduring and heartbreaking cold cases. It was a stark reminder that even after victory was declared and peace painstakingly restored, some wounds refused to heal, some questions refused to be silenced. For over 6 decades, the mountains held their secret, an impenetrable vault, and the fate of the vanished hospital train remained an agonizing unknown, a silent testament to a truth deliberately concealed. 66 years had elapsed since the hospital train vanished into the alpine mists, transforming from an urgent wartime mystery into a forgotten footnote of a global conflict. The world had moved on, technology had advanced, and the war's raw wounds had scabbed over, though never fully healed. It was in this distant present, far removed from the desperate days of 1944, that a faint echo of the past began to resonate. Deep within the dusty archives of an Austrian railway museum, a dedicated historian named Helmut Weiss pursued his quiet passion. As the tunnel archivist, Weiss spent his days poring over obscure and forgotten wartime documents, meticulously cataloging the logistical arteries that once pulsed through the heart of Europe. One ordinary afternoon, amidst stacks of brittle blueprints and faded topographical maps, Helmut made a pivotal discovery. Tucked away in a forgotten folder, he unearthed a set of old wartime sighting diagrams. These were not generic schematics. They detailed the specific alpine rail tunnel spur near Werfen, the very location where the hospital consist had last been diverted. The paper was yellowed, the ink faded, but 2 critical annotations stood out with startling clarity. Beside the depiction of the spur was a hand-drawn Red Cross symbol, an unmistakable wartime emblem unequivocally linking the diagram to a hospital train. More chillingly, scrawled next to the Red Cross was a single, deeply unsettling word: sealed. Helmut Weiss immediately grasped the profound significance of this finding. The Red Cross confirmed the location's connection to the missing train, but the word sealed shattered the long-held assumption of an accidental disappearance. It suggested deliberate action, not merely abandonment or destruction. It implied an intentional act of concealment at the precise spot where the train was last known to exist. This single, overlooked piece of paper, preserved in forgotten archives for 66 years, suddenly provided the first tangible lead in over 6 decades. It was a jolt from the past, an unexpected whisper of truth that cut through the silence of history, reigniting the cold case and offering a potential, albeit terrifying, pathway to understanding the fate of Lt. Myra Donnelly and her colleagues. A hidden clue, preserved for generations, suddenly shone a light on the lost nurses' train, pointing to a deliberate act rather than an accident. Helmut Weiss's discovery of the annotated sighting diagram immediately activated a dormant cold case, propelling it from the realm of historical conjecture into a live, urgent investigation. The Austrian authorities, in conjunction with international historical experts, swiftly moved to analyze the fragile documents and revisit the long-forgotten alpine rail tunnel spur near Werfen. This was no longer a simple historical inquiry. The implications of a deliberately sealed train carrying medical personnel demanded a thorough, modern examination. Initial reconnaissance of the site began with a meticulous survey, employing advanced technologies unavailable during the immediate post-war period. Ground-penetrating radar was deployed, its waves mapping the subsurface anomalies beneath the seemingly innocuous hillside, searching for evidence of the very sealed notation that had ignited the renewed interest. The radar images began to reveal irregularities consistent with intentional backfilling or structural alteration within the spur, corroborating Helmut's startling insight. To lead the delicate and potentially hazardous field efforts, a specialized team was assembled. Among them was Ordnance Tech PFC Nia Tors, a seasoned specialist in excavation and site analysis. Her expertise lay in meticulously uncovering buried secrets, whether they were unexploded ordnance or, in this unprecedented case, the remnants of a wartime mystery. Tors understood the immense historical weight of the task, knowing that every shovelful of earth could alter decades of understanding, potentially revealing the fate of LT. Myra Donnelly and her colleagues. Mounting an archaeological dig in such a remote, historically sensitive and potentially unstable location presented significant logistical challenges. The alpine terrain, while picturesque, was unforgiving. Access roads were minimal, and the sheer volume of equipment required for a safe and thorough excavation demanded careful planning and execution. Safety protocols, particularly given the possibility of encountering wartime explosives or unstable ground, were paramount. The renewed investigation, understandably, drew considerable public and media attention. For the descendants of those lost, like Colin Donnelly, the news brought a complex mix of emotions. Decades of resigned acceptance were suddenly pierced by a cautious, almost terrifying rekindling of hope. The possibility of answers, however grim, was a powerful draw. With the site secured, a perimeter established and heavy excavation equipment carefully positioned, the meticulous planning transitioned into the preparation for the physical dig. Every detail, from soil samples to structural reinforcement, was considered. The stage was now set for an unprecedented excavation, poised to unearth secrets buried for over half a century, secrets that promised to redefine the fate of the vanished nurses' train. The physical excavation at the Alpine Rail Tunnel spur began with a meticulous caution that belied the 66 years of anticipation. Under the watchful eye of PFC Nia Tors, her team initiated the painstaking work, carefully removing layers of earth and debris that had accumulated over decades. The initial stages involved the slow, deliberate clearing of the tunnel entrance, revealing evidence of intentional backfilling. Massive stones, heavy timbers, and compacted earth, clearly not the result of natural rockfall, corroborated the sealed notation on Helmut Weiss's diagram. This was no abandoned spur. It had been deliberately, robustly concealed. Days of arduous labor progressed, each shovelful of soil bringing the team closer to the heart of the enigma. Advanced sensors indicated a void beyond the blockage, a space that had been deliberately entombed. Then, with a final breach through a reinforced concrete barrier, the sealed section of the tunnel was finally exposed. It was not an empty cavity, nor was it a site of wreckage. Instead, a chillingly organized arrangement came into view. Stacks of wooden crates, neatly packed and carefully hidden within the darkness of the spur. The air, trapped for over half a century, held a stale, metallic scent. As the first crates were gingerly brought into the light and pried open, the true nature of their contents was revealed, shattering every preconception about the vanished train. Inside, there were no medical kits, no stretchers, no humanitarian supplies expected from a hospital consist. Instead, the crates overflowed with looted valuables. Stacks of gold coins, intricate jewelry, precious artworks, and other cultural artifacts, all meticulously packed and preserved. It was a staggering cache of stolen wealth, a treasure hoard hidden away from the ravages of war and the scrutiny of history. PFC Nia Tors and her team immediately grasped the profound and sinister implication of this discovery. The nurses' train was not merely a hospital consist that had vanished. It was a calculated deception, a sophisticated cover operation. The humanitarian mission had been a pretense, a convenient guise for transporting ill-gotten gains under the cloak of wartime necessity. The medical staff, including LT Myra Donnelly, had been integral to this elaborate ruse, their presence lending an air of legitimacy to the train's movements. Then came the most chilling realization. a truth that redefined the entire disappearance. The absence of the nurses' remains within the sealed section, combined with the nature of the cargo, pointed to a horrifying conclusion. The original medical staff, including Lt. Myra Donnelly, were not victims of a crash or explosion within the spur. They had been deliberately separated before the cargo was hidden. They were removed from the train forcibly before the valuables were concealed and the tunnel sealed. The discovery of the hidden cache fundamentally redefined the entire disappearance, solving one mystery only to reveal a far more sinister truth about the fate of the nurses. The physical mystery of the vanished hospital train was finally resolved. It was not destroyed in an air raid, nor had it been lost to the unforgiving alpine landscape. Instead, it had been deliberately concealed, its humanitarian facade a sophisticated cover for a clandestine transport of ill-gotten gains. The sealed notation on the wartime diagram had indicated a deliberate act, and the excavated tunnel spur, brimming with looted treasures, confirmed a calculated deception. The train itself was a vessel for stolen wealth, hidden away from the world for over 6 decades. However, the resolution of the train's fate only sharpened the chilling truth about its human cargo. The absence of the nurses' remains within the sealed spur, coupled with the nature of the discovered valuables, led to a grim, inescapable conclusion. Lieutenant Myra Donnelly and her colleagues were not victims of an accident within the tunnel. They had been forcibly separated before the cargo was hidden. This implied a direct, violent intervention, a deliberate act orchestrated by those who sought to exploit the train's humanitarian mission for their own nefarious purposes. The nurses had been removed, their lives irrevocably altered before the tunnel was entombed. While their individual fates remained a tragic, unanswered question, the manner of their disappearance was now understood not as a vanishing act, but as a calculated atrocity. For Colin Donnelly, Lieutenant Donnelly's nephew, this profound revelation brought a complex, searing form of closure. Decades of agonizing uncertainty and the haunting specter of a lost loved one were replaced by a grim certainty. The family's hopes for a simple accident or a wartime misunderstanding evaporated, replaced by the crushing weight of a deliberate, tragic act. The mystery of the disappearance was solved, but at the cost of uncovering a far more sinister crime against his relative and the other dedicated nurses. The process of documenting, preserving, and repatriating the discovered looted valuables began, adding a layer of historical justice to the resolution. The treasures, once symbols of wartime greed and exploitation, would now serve as tangible evidence of a dark chapter in history. Yet, the legacy of this deception extended far beyond the recovered artifacts. It reflected the dark ingenuity of wartime criminality, the meticulous planning required to maintain a secret for decades, and the enduring memory of brave individuals like Lieutenant Myra Donnelly, whose humanitarian mission was so tragically exploited. The train was found, its true purpose unveiled, but the brave nurses, who once rode it with purpose, remained a poignant symbol of sacrifice and a testament to hidden wartime atrocities, their ultimate individual fates still echoing as a silent cry for full justice.